You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the meta. The meta controls everything. The meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching The Meta Show.
And welcome everybody to The Meta Show. It is April the 19th. Actually, it's the 18th. Tomorrow's the 19th. April 18th, 2020. We are on week 5 of the quarantine, and Mittens and I are getting a little stir crazy, I think. Maybe just a little. We're back in suit and ties today, so this is a good show.
I'm afraid,
not quite in time for you.
This is sort of the nightmare. And I also like Asher's face being hidden. That's appropriate. I know that he doesn't like to show his face on TV, and so even his non-face being hidden is good. But my nightmare when I wear a blue suit, because again we're in, I wouldn't say nice guy mittens, but I'd say slightly friendlier mittens as opposed to like blood and thunder and red and black last week, is when I look at myself. And I'm delighted that I ended up getting a quarantine haircut from my girlfriend, who actually knows how to like do hair. But the nightmare is you always look over and you're wearing a blue suit and you're some like generic white guy pretty boy, and you're like, my God, I hope I don't look like Pete Buttigieg. That's basically just when I look over, I'm like, still got hair, wearing blue. It's gross, but as long as I don't look like Pete Buttigieg, I'm okay.
What was it like when your girlfriend showed up to your house with the Flowbee? Was that a good moment for you?
It wasn't a Flowbee, but like we actually got, so this is like an inspiring, at least for me, quarantine story. So like I was having a really bad week a couple of weeks ago before, like basically when I look like me in junior high school, when I look at like before I turned into like yuppie asshole space tyrant mittens, and I look at like junior high school Alex. And when I was getting really fuzzy like hair like that, it was really starting to get kind of depressing. Like I don't really get depressed like people with clinical depression, but I was feeling down. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see me. And it was almost magical. It was like the opposite of being Samson. So my girlfriend knows how to like do hair because she like had a bunch of military friends and cut lots of military hair, and I like military style haircuts. And then after she like fixed this, I was like, my God. I'm like, I look in the mirror, I look like me again. Everything is not so awful. So it was a life-changing haircut.
Does your family do the thing where when you've heard the story before, you hold up the fingers for the approximate number of times you've heard the story? Does your family do that?
No, but if people did that, they'd run out of fingers around me.
Yeah, I'm holding up 5 right now. I've got 5 fingers held up for this haircut story because I believe this is the 5th time I've heard about your miraculous haircut story.
It was the kind of haircut that you want to tell stories about.
I was actually cursing myself. I'm like, this Flowbee joke was not worth having to hear this story for the 5th time. I wasn't ready for it.
You brought this on yourself, baby. You brought
this on yourself. It's all my fault. What can I say?
Well, look, I have to say, first of all, speaking of haircut stories, if you guys did not see Open Comms last night,
Asher, you did this.
I had to bring it up. If you guys had not seen Open Comms last night, we had CCP Spider on the show. I was not on the show. My Titan alt and cousin Wilsk was on the show. He's a lot more rough around the edges than I am. Mm-hmm. But we were able to raise, I think, 27,000 Plex for Good for the COVID-19 relief. And as a result, Spider shaved his head live on Open Comms last night. Wow. And if you guys have seen CCP Spider prior to the head shaving, he had like some very nice hair that he really cared about a lot. So that was kind of a big deal. So if you guys did not see
I would
that,
like to see a clip of that. If somebody has a clip of that, like that they get a link in
it's pretty good.
That'd be pretty hilarious. All right. Well, what are we doing here today, Brisk? I'm in nice and kind and family friendly mittens mode. So why am I being family friendly today?
We are being family friendly because, again, as has happened a couple of times in the last few weeks, we're trying new things on the Meta Show. We did our Fireside Chat edition, but we did that like 2 weeks ago, so we didn't want to do another Fireside Chat edition. Neither Mittens nor I, having both been on the CSM, could give an absolute shit about the CSM minutes, so we didn't want to do a minutes review show. If you want to see those, all of the other shows will do them. Trust me.
Go someplace else. We don't give a shit.
This is not what we want to do on the Meta Show tonight. Not today. Maybe later, but not today. So go watch Talking to Stations or Push to Talk, one of the other shows that has done that, and you can get all the CSM minutes that you care about. So what we thought we would do is we came up with a concept called a Meta Show Spotlight Show, where we pick one person in the community that we think it would be cool to sit and just have an hour-long chat session with. And I think it was funny because Mittens and I were sitting in our production meeting trying to figure out who do we want to invite for the inaugural Meta Show Spotlight.
Killer Bee wasn't available.
Exactly. The first name that came to both our minds was Asher Elias.
All right.
My heart.
Yeah. Well,
it's so warm.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, his ego is going to be intolerable. I'll have to bust him back down to the 24th best Imperium FC after this.
Thank you.
But yeah, so one of the things about this, and in general, we'll skip past the meta show, meta commentary, but one of the things we found back in the day is that we would be sort of imprisoned by the format of the show. And we have since realized after doing the fireside chat show that we did a couple weeks ago, and by doing the sort of Jerry Springer, let's all end up laughing at Olmeca show, which was not what we planned on doing. Again, I was supposed to be the adult in the room. Marana told me to do that. So she basically set me up to lose my shit on live TV. So yeah, no, we want to mess around with formats. We don't really, again, we don't have much space news this week. There are things that are kind of happening in places, and there's a bunch of patch notes we could talk about, but it's been too soon since the game was patched to really dive into what we know about the impacts will be, because it's just too soon. It would just be stupid theories that don't matter. And so next week we're hoping to have more of a traditional hey, here's what's happened in EVE Online this week. But right now there's not too much. I don't know, I'll just start shit off here. Asher, I don't want to go into the weeds about the patch notes, this, that, and the other thing or anything but can you just give us an overview of what you think the state of the nitty gritty tactical aspects of the game? Because I'll talk about politics all day long, but one of the things that you are really good at as the 23rd best FC in the Imperium is being able to describe what's changed from a nitty gritty blood and steel kind of way.
First off, I'm sort of fascinated by the deep tech. Is my avatar moving around on the screen?
Yes.
That is wow. Okay. I've never seen this. You guys have the dark technologies on this show.
Exactly.
Also, Mittens, you said constrained by the format. I'm fairly certain that the three of us, if we were unconstrained by the format and time constraints, would be doing this show till about 10 p.m. That's
Easy.
That's my thoughts on it.
That's true. Yeah, the biggest danger is we can talk paint off the wall. All three of us have the ability to talk paint off the wall, and we enjoy doing it, so it sucks to be the paint.
We'd be doing it until everyone in the audience is holding up 5 fingers. I've heard this one before, guys. All right, so the meta. There was an overall resist nerf, which honestly is something I have been looking for a while. It was done in an interesting way where they basically did it to the modules, right? So ships essentially have kept their same basic resist profile. Why does this matter? It's important because certain ships have a lot of resist baked in. T2 ships, you think about hacks, other ships, they've got resist baked in already, and those were not affected. So it has the effect of making those ships, which were already kind of strong as is, more valuable than they were before. We haven't seen how it plays out. There's often, the theory of unintended consequences. I think kiting ships got even better. That's great for me. I love kiting, but lots of people don't like it. How many?
Why does it not surprise me at all that you are the king of kiting bullshit?
Yeah, no, it
does not surprise me.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, that's the perfect game of any game for me is where it takes me 5 hours to beat them. They pull their hair out, then they quit and never play again. People like me should not be encouraged to do well in EVE, but here I am, right? There's so many FCs that have just love to go in and brawl and trade ships, and I am so bored of that. We had this fight a few weeks ago with Typhoons versus Feroxes, and it was just going through, and we were each just killing each other, and by minute 10, I was just I was yawning. I was so tired of it. Yeah, but everyone else seemed like they had, not everyone else, but most other people seemed like they had a great time just trading their ships for other ships. So
I love, I'm an old school, my favorite combats in EVE Online have always been dread brawls, right? The idea of like my handicap in Eve, like one of the reasons that I just never really got into FCing, even though I've tried repeatedly over the years, is that for me, and maybe this is just an excuse. I don't know, if I like spent days and days working at it, maybe I'd figure it out. But I'm also a very lazy mitten. Is it's really hard for me to think in 3D. And like kiting is one of those things. Like I'm not sure whether like my kinesthetic sense, like whatever spatial recognition-y type things, whatever it is in my brain that's supposed to happen, being able to like basically see these rotating orbiting balls, like here's your FC, here's your anchor, here's your logic anchor, you've got these things, and then there's over there, like figuring out how to actually get these fucking things to kite properly, has always seemed like a superpower to me, because it seems really hard to do. And the thing about kiting is, and you would know this better than me, is that if you kind of fuck it up, like you're screwed. Like if you get caught, and you're
totally
like, there you go. So like the fact that you can do this is really interesting, coming from the perspective of somebody who's like, I like dread fights because everyone is stationary and just obliterating each other. And
that's sort of been a pocket theory of mine for a long time, is that FCs who say I like brawling, it's sort of just a code word for I can't visualize 3D space.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally true.
And I think that's, it's a weird skill to have, because you don't like need it for a lot of things. Wasn't Ender's Game part of this? Like, wasn't that a big part of it? I don't remember.
I think so, actually.
Yeah, but like I think that's a big part of being, a good, decent kiting FC, is being able to do that. And I don't know if it can even be developed. Like, I don't remember ever like trying to learn.
I wonder if there's a way that we could test for it. Like, if there's a way that we could do it, basically try to isolate people that think that they can think in 3D in other games, and then try to teach them how to FC, rather than trying to recruit FCs and hoping that some of them magically know how to do it.
Yeah. Well, there's like, so that it's interesting they bring that up. I know in like League of Legends, a big thing for the pros now is finding people who are really mechanically talented and then teaching them the macro of the game, because it's easier to do that than to teach someone who knows really good macro good mechanics. Like, good mechanics seems to be more innate, and good macro can be learned.
Right.
And so that's sort of what you're saying is if you have the skill innately, we can teach you the rest.
I mean, that's exactly what happened with me when Elo Knight taught me how to FC dread fleets. So like back in the day, this was many, many years ago now. We were up in the Galactic Northwest, and you were still having like R64s. And so this was probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. I forget. It was after the Fountain War. But back in the day, you would do ninja sieging. So you would drop a bunch of dreads on a boss, and you would have 5 minutes in and out, and you'd be cat boosting your way back up. And basically, because I didn't have to think about maneuver, and I knew that the points would be functionally fixed, Elo and I just sat around and I just asked him a zillion questions and just did this and developed a checklist. And then I was like, okay, I can do this. And it was actually pretty easy, right? Because like, if you didn't have to think about maneuver, and, your fleet was at a fixed point that would come in at the Sino, and then, there would be bumps, but it would mostly stay put, and the target would be there and mostly stay put, then the rest was simple, right? As long as it wasn't this whatever the fucky thing. And I think that's basically the issue with brawling fleets, is you have two FCs that don't want to.
Yeah, no, you're 100%
wanna,
accurate. Yeah, and it's interesting to bring up Elo, because he is definitely one of those people who naturally has that sort of vision of the game, and it's easy to tell. Like, it's really easy to tell. You'll see these big fights where like 8 fleets are swirling around each other, especially in the hack meta now, and it's easy to tell who's good and who's bad. Like, if you just get on grid, sit at 1,000 and watch it, like if you're not involved in it particularly, it's very easy to tell who has it and who doesn't. And anyway, yeah, so when you're brawling, you're just a point in space, and they're just a point in space, and you don't really have to consider how you guys relate, other than maybe some very like boring stuff, simple stuff. That's why Ishtars, by the way, are so complicated, especially back when they used sentries, was because you have your Ishtar fleet, right? You have your drone blob, which you might make in a chain. You have to consider the tracking of the drone to the enemy fleet, your tracking of, like, so you don't shoot, but them shooting your fleet. And then if they're doing Ishtars, you have to track where their fleet is and where their drones are. And say there's 3 or 4 Ishtar fleets on the field, which happens sometimes. The amount of things that you have to track and then have an idea of what they're doing, it gets to be, people couldn't do it. And that's why Ishtars were like, people were like, oh, these ships are so broken. It turned out they aren't really broken except in the hands of like 5 people. But in those 5 people, they were really, really, really broken. The
Well,
five people who could
it's
do
like
that.
you with
Right.
a Cerberus fleet. Like, you know, your outcomes when you take out Cerbs are completely different than the outcomes of fleet commanders that do not know how to do the kitey stuff and handle Cerbs. Right?
I mean,
It's like that.
Serbs are a lot easier because you yeah. I mean, that's just more of a kiting thing. Right? Ishtars were a lot harder than that. Serbs, like, you don't have to track where your ships are relative to theirs because there's no gun, um, you know, you know, calculations you have to do. The missiles do it themselves, right? So that's the nice thing about Serbs is you can really focus on spacing. I think that they're a better like starter fleet for kiting than some other stuff.
The only downside with that is like you're kind of locked on the grid with the missiles because as soon as you warp off, the missiles
Yeah.
disappear. So you can't really do it. I mean, it's hard to like.
I've always wanted to do skip missiles. Like I wish CCP would let us do that. Where
That
if
would
you
be
could,
nice.
if you stayed on grid, the missiles would still continue to fire. So if I could fire warp and have those missiles still connect, it would open up a lot of options. It might be too powerful, but I don't think it would be. Like it would need specific situations.
I mean, I don't think we're ever going to see the good old days of cavalry ravens and stuff like that. But you know, at the very least, I think it would make missiles a more viable option in a lot of these larger fleet fights. Because honestly, the way with these hack changes, and this is one of the reasons why Mittens and I decided we didn't want to do the show this week just talking about the balance changes that went through on Tuesday, because 4 days, and not even 4 days, like 3.5 days of data as to what the new things are going to be is just not enough. So I don't think we've seen any major changes yet, other than potentially, the Imperium and some other big groups have all docked up our supers for a week to figure things out.
Yeah.
But I don't think, at least in terms of the subcap meta, that anybody's really made any crazy changes. We've taken our Kiki Stuka fleets out, and it's it's the same as it's always been. It's easier to kill supers now if we catch them, but that's about it.
Yeah, there needs to be some big engagements first before people. I mean, the meta in Eve, just to get a grasp on it, it takes a long time because there aren't these fights happening every day. There was a big fight in Cache a few days ago, and that had Munins, Eagles, and Serbs. But I only saw the BR, so it's hard. You can get some ideas from the BR, but you don't know when people arrived. There's all kinds of stuff that you don't know. But yeah, there needs to be data, and that data comes from fights, and fights only happen every so often. Like there's only so many gigantic 200 plus man fights happening. Maybe there's 5 a week, right?
Yep.
I don't know, but to
that
get data takes a while.
It would be great, a battle report tool that did everything, like included when groups warped on grid, when somebody warped out. I mean, caught all that stuff so you could see it. Just so you have some kind of like a timeline of the battle. All right, this is what happened. I know there's ones that do it by like timestamp, and you can see that. But man, I would love to have like a little bit more data just to be able to look at like a battle report and have it be more than just numbers. I mean, have it be like a box score in baseball, so I can, all right, this is what happened when. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah, so someone mentioned in the chat, what I was going to bring up, the crest reports from the AT, which basically you could rebuild a fight using the report. And I was always thinking that CCP was going to develop something like that for the game as a whole, where hopefully they would have that data cached for a few hours, and you could request that it be locked or whatever, so that you could see that. But it's never happened. I don't know if it's maybe server-wise it's not possible for that big of a fight, but it'd be really nice to see something like that, because you could look at the fight from a couple days away and rewatch it in a sense. There used to be sort of these Eve reporters who would like fly to fights and attempt to give you a stream of it, but it seems like that's not as common anymore. I don't know exactly why. Maybe it's harder to find them. I don't know, but you don't get those reporters as much.
I think it's
there's
because
always a hesitancy to want people to do that, because there's always the whole OPSEC thing going on. I mean, that's why, like, it seems like it's very rare to see anybody live streaming any of these big fights anymore. All they do is record them, and then they'll put a YouTube video up later where they make it go twice as fast and throw some really shitty grunge music in the background or some kind of punk rock stuff, and that's it.
I think I have an idea why that is. So first of all, obviously reporters would go to the big Keepstar fights and like that, and we would do this on INN for a while. Like, this was the thing that we would do when there would be big wars. We would send reporters to live stream on this channel, as did OPA and as did just a whole bunch of people over the history of Eve. But I think what's changed is that one of the reasons that was possible in the first place, unless you had an intelligence network attached to the reporter, is that back in the day, a lot of those fights were still over FuzzySoft, right? And so that meant that you had that free, perfect information popping up on .lan, like, hey, there's an iHub here that got reinforced. Hey, there's that. And so, like, in the modern environment, because sort of the nullsec play style has evolved to avoiding FuzzySoft because it's just such boring bullshit, that by the time that you actually get to, hey, there's a timer has popped up in Amist, and I think I'm going to go send my guy out there to go report on it. You know, all the Sturm and Drang are over, it's over Citadel timers, right? It's over big fights over Citadels, and the only people who are aware of the Citadel timers are the more traditional, like pre-FuzzySoft, you did the homework, you had a recon team, somebody wrote it down on a spreadsheet, you made a note that there was going to be a conflict driver at this point. It wasn't like free intel recon party zone. So I think that's been part of it. And also just the reality is that's, you know, since we went up north to Glass Tribute last year and fuck all happened from that, right? There hasn't really been any big stuff. Like there's just not really been any big you know, of course there was things that happened in the Galactic Northwest, and Deadco is sort of like disintegrated and part of it is folded into the Imperium and things like that. But in terms of like Sovawar and just real block level fighting, that was, you know, that was more of like an internal collapse rather than, you know, big war. So
we were talking about it today, me and a couple friends. I mean, realize X-47, that was 2 years ago. I think Push to Talk mentioned it too, and that's what got us talking. I mean, it was 2 years ago.
Time is a fucking blur. Wow.
You know, so and Arenda says that a lot of these don't get a lot of eyes, but I'll tell you the big fights. You know, when we did the Imperium news stream on X-47 and then and on UALX, we had, I want to say, 2,000 or 3,000 people watching, because you get everybody that is normally, you know, in the fight, they're watching the streams because they're getting intel from it. They're being able to say, all right, what is the impact of this having on these other guys? So we had a ton of people. Plus, those are the types of things that are in the news, and we get, and that's when you get eyeballs, when people want to see Eve. And as soon as you get over like 1,000 views, then people start realizing, well, wow, this is something, you know, cool. We should check it out, and you get on the front page and stuff like that of Twitch. What
do you think about the theory? I've heard this espoused a few times by different people, that the player reaction to FuzzySoft was so negative that it discouraged them from fixing it. Because I've heard people say that, you know, basically CCP decided that no matter what you do, it's going to be damned if you do, damned if you don't. They won't like the new system, so we might as well just leave FuzzySoft instead of deving a new system that could be better, because the players will just hate it anyway and just shit on you for doing it.
I mean,
but they hate everything.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's an excuse, because, like, you know, if that was actually the case, first of all, in hell, we had, I think we talked about this with Rise on the Meta Show several weeks ago, maybe it was a month ago, I don't know, time is a blur again. But I remember asking them specifically about Sov stuff, because, you know, there was a natural progression between them fixing Citadels, and like Citadels are clearly intended at some level, and they've said as much, to sort of replace the Sov system once Citadels have been tuned, because then you have the functions of the iHub merged into the Citadel code, and we go from there. But, like, you know, Fozzy might cry about it, but in practice, every single Sov system ever has been relentlessly shit on by the player base. But then again, everything CCP does has people complaining about it all the time. So, you know, unless the Sov team or whoever's on it has turned into like a bunch of complete snowflakes or something, like that's not a viable excuse, right? Like if you if you ship a Sov system that sucks and people say this sucks, then you fix it. And if you don't, you don't get any victim credibility from me anyway. I'm not going to give you people were mean to you on the internet, and so it's okay that you don't want to fix the Sov system. I think it's just that they haven't prioritized it. They're working mainly on the NPE, and it does look like they're getting around to it. And I do think that we will eventually see iHubs being basically like the iHubs will be iHubs, but they will be like Citadel iHubs, and
right.
You know, the mods on them and shit.
I agree.
Like that.
You got to feel like when what's the company that bought them? The Korean company.
Perlibus.
Perlibus.
Yeah, Perlibus. I almost said Penny Arcade, which is PA. So
yeah. Penny Arcade can afford to buy a gaming company. Man, I got to give those guys credit.
When Perlibus bought CCP, you got to figure that their management team looked at the new player experience, was like, hey, you guys got to fix this. Like we know how to onboard new players, and this is not the way, because it feels like as soon as they right when they got bought, that's when the NPE focus came in. And so I imagine that was directed.
I don't
You
know
don't think
about
so?
that, Ash, because I'll tell you, I played Black Desert, and that's another one of these games where it kind of just dumps you in from the front, and it's like, all right, figure this shit out yourself.
All right.
So it's that was kind of interesting. But I mean, I think what I think, if anything, it gave them the impetus to say, all right, if we want to hit our numbers and make this deal worth it, so all of our stock options go up even higher, we probably need to get new players to play the game. So that might have been a kickstart to give them a little kick in the pants to do what they knew they needed to do before.
I got a question here in chat, which is, was there, if I could go back to any SOV system, which one would we potentially like to go back to? And it's a nuanced question, because I don't really think of any of the SOV systems that we've had as being particularly good. I mean, Dominion, in terms of the player combat, was both Dominion and POSSOV were really good in terms of focusing conflict drivers and player conflict. But the challenge with Dominion was that you could conquer half the galaxy and not need to live in it, right? So like SBUs and iHubs having kill mails were really good, right? I think Eve should involve things blowing up and getting a fucking kill mail for it at the end of the day. The POSSOV system was awful in systems where you had 50 moons or something, and so you're basically, the burden of having SOV fell entirely on your logistics division, and that was just unfair and shitty, because you basically had to have a bunch of masochists in your logistics division.
What does GSOL stand for?
Goonswarm Offensive Logistics.
yeah, which is it's sort of a misnomer now.
Yeah, so like back in the day, one of the sort of like balancing ideas would be to have you could have SOV POSs on planets instead of on moons, so you wouldn't have these systems like POS-SOV in like some of those early ISS systems where you would have only 5 moons, right? That's 5, Alex, not 4. 5 moons, 5 moons. And then it would like 1 Victor. A lot of the fights in 1 Victor in Scalding Pass were huge, because it was all hinging upon one side had 3 bosses and the other side had 2. And if you got to flip that 1, then you'd have control of the system, and teenagers have poor judgment. So there was a lot of fun during that system. I really think that FozzySov is close to being dustbin, right? I think really all we have to do is get to the point where iHubs can fulfill the functions of using the Citadel mechanics, that all those SOV functions can be put into a Citadel, and then we can just forget FozzySov ever existed. Like I think we're so close to that.
I mean, I think my problem with it is really, my problem with the FozzySov stuff right now is that I feel like there are enough game mechanics that prioritize and provide incentives to engage in small game warfare, and FozzySov is inherently a nullsec empire fighting level kind of thing. If you're dealing with SOV, for the most part, maybe if you're a little guy in Faith Abilis or Omist or somewhere, and nobody's paying attention to you, you can get away with wanting a whole system and not having to worry about it. But otherwise, it's going to be big fleet fights, and there's nothing that's more boring than being in a big fleet fight, and you're in the defense fleet, sitting on a gate, while people in their little Entosa ships are flying around and trying to find nodes.
You're getting a remote report
about it. You got a spreadsheet up to make
yeah.
sure you check, all right, there's a node in here, and how many more do we need, and all this other. It's not fun. There's no conflict. The only time there's conflict is when somebody goes after one of those guys, and then you rush over there. By the time the fleet gets there, those guys are already either dead or gone, so you're not getting any fights.
Yeah,
so
our spreadsheets
at the
are
end
really
of the
the
day,
deep tech.
the system needs to provide a conflict driver for the big empires to fight fleet fights, which is why I think, as Mittens was saying, I think if we can get to a place back to where, kind of like we had in Dominion, where you have a structure that handles sovereignty and it follows the structure rules, and there are fleet fights over the armor timer, and there are fleet fights over the hull timer, and you want to make sure that you're in there, and you can try to get your guys in, and you can play games with Sino inhibitors and all kinds of stuff. That creates the big kind of fleet style fights that the big empires want to have, and I think that would probably get us, at least 80% of the way there. Everybody will hate it, but I think it'll be better than the system that it is now. But I'll tell you, I've never seen a community that is as is as fundamentally conservative as Eve. And when I mean conservative, I mean little c, like we hate change. Do not change anything that we like or that is familiar, because we will bitch to high heaven about it. And that's why one of the things that freaked me out was in the minutes, in the UI, in the CSM minutes, there's a whole section talking about the UI and UI changes. And I guarantee you, if they make any changes to the overview or UI type stuff, everybody is going to go batshit.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: is like I think that there's a pretty easy way to tell, like the background noise of people are going to whine when you know, whatever corporate analogy you want to use, don't move my cheese, or just humans are inherently conservative, or like people don't like change or stuff like that. Like you can balance that out. Like you compare that to something like with FuzzySoft, where people visibly do not want to do it, right? Like it's not just that they changed it and then they got over it, but people go out of their way to avoid engaging with the content. Right. And just the biggest thing, and I think this is an important thing, when they did the Dominion soft system, Dominion, and also in my view one of the best trailers in the history of EVE Online was the Dominion soft system. Like the Dominion trailer is just one of the best depictions of what it is actually like in terms of the feel and commanding things and bouncing between comm systems and trying to coordinate fleets. It really gets the sort of emotional tenor and the feel of a genuine, surprising nullsec battle right. So if you haven't seen the Dominion trailer, please do check it out. But one of the things that's just Dominion, by the time that Dominion happened, you had people who had been players during the Great War had gotten jobs at CCP. And a lot of the people that were involved in designing the Dominion expansion actually had some idea about what nullsec life was like. They had actually been in empires. They had known what the conflicts were like, and they knew what it was cool, and they knew what the players in nullsec wanted. And one of the reasons why I never stopped getting annoyed and rolling my eyes and relentlessly shit-talking FuzzySoft is it is one of the most extreme examples of when CCP has completely revised an aspect of gameplay and put somebody who knew nothing about it in charge of designing this thing. Like Fozzy just went off and came back and was like, here's my idea of what we're going to do with FuzzySoft. And he doesn't, he's not a nullsec warrior, did not understand the mindset of the player base, did not understand the horrific impact, which we still see to this day, right? This is still something that is bad in EVE, and CCP could flick a switch and fix it, but they haven't, is giving away free intel, free recon. You can be in JITA and you can know that an iHub has been sieged in Amist without doing any recon work, without any espionage work, without anything, because they just decided, well, we'll just give everybody perfect information, not understanding that there's an entire part of gameplay involving spies, involving recon, involving scouts, involving all of this important shit that goes into the gameplay around the fog of war. And if you're only like a 5 versus 5, like cool kid, low sec PvP or something like that, then you're not going to understand that. And so I hope that when CCP does get around to messing with the soft system again, that maybe they should actually talk to people who have some idea about how the empires work, such that they don't, Sov laser, like I can talk about how I don't like the Sov laser system and things like that. But the reason I keep referring to the recon issue of perfect intel being such a problem by the timers being publicly posted, regardless of whether you've seen them, is that it is an example of an accidental destruction of a style of gameplay, right? I can say that I'm a nullsec guy and I don't like Entosis ones, and that's fine. But that's not nearly as damaging to the game as, hey guys, we're fixing the SOB system and we didn't realize what recon does, we didn't realize what spies do, and now all this information that you used to work hard to get is now free for all. Oops. It's just like a completely random knocking, like you're blundering through a china shop and knocking important things over. I don't know. I can rant about this for a long time.
Yeah. Here's a compromise. What would you guys think about this idea? What if once you own the system, you can choose between a point defense, like, attack the iHub with your guns and blow it up, or FuzzySoft. So the little guy, if he wanted FuzzySoft, can have it. But if you wanted to have a more traditional EVE type soft system, you can have that too. and then we could make fun of anyone who didn't opt into doing that. If NC Dot went with FuzzySoft, then we would know. Hey, all right, but I don't think they would.
Wouldn't they do that just to troll us? Like, you guys got to deal with the cancer. Tough, deal with it.
Yeah, probably.
So that's kind of. I mean, I like the idea of there being some kind of an agency or a choice involved in that. But frankly, I mean, somebody in the chat said Citadels have broken the game. Yes, I mean, yes, I can't prove you wrong. That's true. They're too powerful. They do more than outposts and stations ever did. They are huge conflict deniers. They're very useful. Everybody needs them, but they're so good that you can't live without them. And that's why I feel like there needs to be some significant changes to Citadels. And I think they can package all the FuzzySoft stuff, all the soft changes into changing Citadels to make them a little less crazy. I mean, it makes no sense to me why a low power structure has an armor has a damage cap, or why a low power structure still has tethering. I mean, if the systems don't work because there's no power, why the hell can my ship tether? Why can I get auto repaired? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm hoping that that's something that they will address, because really,
I think that's pretty close. Like, the things like the big, like what you're saying is like big problems with Citadels, and those are problems with low power Citadels. Like, I don't disagree with you, but instead of going like Citadels are a huge problem, I see that almost because like we've come such a long way with Citadels. Like, I'll shit talk FuzzySoft all I want. When we first got Citadels, I see Citadels actually as a CCP success story, not because of like asset safety. I'm old school. I think asset safety is ridiculous, and I don't care about it at all. I never have. Summer children have been playing this game for only a few years, and they think it's like this, thing that people in nullsec like. I would prefer to be able to annihilate everybody's stuff. Thank you. But CCP, credit to them, have repeatedly iterated on the Citadel stuff. And that's why I do think that it will be part of their future Saw vision, is that like they are trying to fix these things. They are doing something to make it easier to clear them out than they were before. And it's a way better like platform for it. So I actually do have some hope about the future of Citadels, not because of hope Pollyanna-ish, but because CCP has demonstrably added new Citadels, tweaked Citadels, buffed them, nerfed them over and over and over again since their release. So I hope for the best there, at least. I don't know.
I don't think there's any reason not to hope for the best, and I think you're right. They have done all that stuff. I think there's still things that need to be done. I'm looking very much forward to. I very much hope that they address the low power thing, because I think that's frustrating to me. There's too much space trash. There's too much Citadel spam. It takes too long to clear this stuff out. I mean, every single timer. I mean, over and over and over again. It becomes work. It's not fun, especially even just sitting there and shooting something. Oh my God! I guess it was Monday or Tuesday night. We took a Nightmare fleet and went and were shooting at a hobo's Fortizar. I guess this was either in Syndicate or somewhere up in the north. And it was just the most cancerous thing I have done in forever. It took an hour. We had a whole Nightmare fleet of like 40 guys, but we weren't hitting the damage cap. They were just harassing the shit out of us with the newt burst and all kinds of stuff. It was just not fun, but we did it, and we stayed there, and we killed a Raven fleet while we were doing it. That was fun. But as soon as they stopped defending it with anything but the Keepstar weapons, it just got to be tedious. So I'm hoping that they do that. I think they do have a good track record in that regard, but I think that will go a long way to fixing a lot of, I think, the content denial that we're seeing, that perpetuates this belief. And I call it a belief because it's not really true, but people keep thinking it, that there's some kind of stagnation going on in nullsec. And I hope that they get to it soon.
As long as we're just yelling at, like, old men are yelling at clouds, you want to know what I'm not looking forward to?
Get off my lawn, Asher. What?
Yeah, you know what I'm not looking forward to? Having to read all my friends' stupid political opinions on Facebook for the next 6 months. I'm really not looking forward to
already?
that. I'm trying not to.
Facebook.
Wow.
I've gone out of my way to not post anything on Facebook about the virus. I only post cat pictures and funny things. And I've told everybody,
I quit
my
Facebook
page will be
like
fun.
years ago,
Smart.
and life has been so like I have to maintain my Facebook account because we actually have some things related to like the INN Facebook are keyed to my main Facebook account. So I wanted to completely delete my Facebook after the whole like Rohingya genocide that Facebook was involved in making happen, which is kind of a problem. I'm like, genocide bad, social media is cancer. I'm out. So I
Here
ditched
we are.
yeah, and yet
Right.
here we are. And it is really interesting because I did like check, I'll check on Facebook, and it's just all people. Like I thought Twitter was for shit posting your stupid political opinions, and that's all I
it's
do on
way
Twitter.
worse.
Is shit
Yeah,
post.
I was gonna say.
But like
worse.
Facebook, like there's these basically normies, these fucking puppies on Facebook are out there, and then they're like writing these paragraphs of just. I'm delighted to have the character limit on Twitter for a reason because it really cuts down on the boomer posting. Like it's awful. So yeah, Facebook is poison. I highly recommend everybody to do what I did. It is sort of delightful to just say social media is cancer. I'm not doing it anymore. And, just walk the fuck out.
I do Twitter and I do Facebook. More Twitter than Facebook because I like Twitter better. I think it's more interesting. Facebook, I don't want to get into political arguments with my friends. It's just not
exactly.
fair
Like if
most
somebody
of the time.
follows my stupid shit on Twitter, they signed up to follow
You're
my
opting
stupid shit
in.
on Twitter, right?
They're
You're opting
asking
in
for my opinion. They're
Right,
not
exactly.
like, this is my real life friend, so now you get to hear everything I think. No.
Right.
They want to hear what I have to say. I won't do TikTok. I'm not giving my info to the Chinese government. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
TikTok
Not
is
interested.
awesome.
Brisk,
Dude,
TikTok doesn't want you. TikTok does not want you. I'm sorry.
TikTok is the most amazing thing. Like, and the reason it is not because of like any sort of like Chinese thing. Like, I'm not going to upload any TikToks. I'm not going to try to like. I'm fucking 41 years old.
You just like to
I have
watch
no
it.
business. But
Right,
when you're
yeah.
when you're looking for a distraction and like there's never been a better. So here's the thing. I'm going to compare TikTok
Brisk
to Twitter.
talks.
Brisk talks.
Brisk
There
talks.
you go, Redline.
I would watch the brisk talks. So check this out. Twitter algorithmically points you towards outrage, right? Like when you log onto Twitter, you will occasionally see something absurd and kind of funny, but mainly you're on Twitter to be mad as fuck. And the Twitter culture originally, one of the reasons I use it so much is it comes from something awful, right? So like when LiveJournal went down, all the LiveJournal people went to Tumblr, and the Tumblr culture is basically like the fanficker LiveJournal culture. This is actually a thing. I read an article about it a while ago and I was kind of surprised, but the sort of seed culture of like that whole Tumblr thing came originally from fanfickers on LiveJournal. And similarly, Twitter was founded basically in terms of the culture by a bunch of asshole shit posters from somethingawful.com. But it's designed to make you angry and you're saying, "Rrr." But the algorithm on TikTok is designed to make you happy. So when you log on to TikTok and you start flicking through things, especially if it's 3 a.m. and you're high as balls, it just shows you funny, amusing, absurd, ha 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 kind of things. That's the kind of engagement. So like one of the reasons why I find, it's like a palate cleanser is you get on TikTok and you're going to just watch a whole bunch of silly shit. There's going to be fart jokes. You're going to laugh your ass off. And then, you're no longer thinking about whatever apocalypse crap was in your brain at the time.
I don't know. I'll have to check it out. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to bring up how TikTok. Never mind. Let's talk about spaceships.
We can talk about space. We can talk about a lot of stuff. Well, speaking of, all right, so I put cat videos and cat stuff up there. My kitten's birthday is on Monday.
Why did we lead with this? I thought this was was this the news of the day?
Well, it should be. It should be because it's important. My cat is
The nullsec
will
power
be a year
hour?
old on 420, and he weighs like 16 pounds.
It's going to be a
He's
year
the
old
biggest
on
cat I've ever
420.
seen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, cat totally born on 420. So
Nice.
I guess Merck and the guys will be very happy when I tell them that tonight on Saturday Night's Forum. So we got to do a little party for Archie on Monday. I'm such a frickin' Star Trek nerd that my dog's name is Trip and my cat's name is Archer, because I'm like the only person
such
that
a not
liked
Star Trek
Enterprise.
Like
nerd that I
Enterprise?
don't have any idea why that's a Star Trek.
I got it.
It's from one of the prequel shows. I like Star Trek Enterprise. I thought that was a good show. I know I'm in a minority opinion of that, but I like the Quantum Leap guy. He's cool.
Is
So
someone peeling
we ended
tape or
up-
something? You guys hear that noise? Like,
Is there a
Is somebody
noise?
what?
mentioning peeling tape or something? I hear
That
the noise.
that is me. You guys should not be able to hear that too much, but hopefully not.
Everyone
I
can.
was pulling I pulled the sticker off of my off of my anti-pine cones mug, so you don't see the sticker on
I
the
have an
bottle.
anti-pine cones book? Really?
It's my
Yeah,
anti-pine
dude, you
cones
haven't
mug,
seen this
yes.
yet? It's awesome.
I have not.
Yes.
I have not. Wow.
Yes, they kill me, so fuck pine cones.
This
I'm with you.
Watani guy had a hard time at school, I feel. This is from
So,
Bonzo.
yeah, there we go. So, happy birthday to Archie on Monday.
I am so surprised that like an Eve player would be into Star Trek. What an odd combination.
Can you never believe that?
Yeah, unbelievable.
I can't
Enterprise
I was always
had
a
a bad
Babylon
first season,
5
but it
guy
got
more
better.
than like Star Trek. Like when I was in that sort of era, I'm dating myself again, obviously
Yeah.
41 years old. So like Babylon 5, when I was going to college, people had always, growing up, people were into Star Trek and stuff like that. And I respect the idealism of Star Trek, but I am just like such a bloody-handed cynic at this point that like, Babylon 5 always showed more like humanity red in tooth and claw and like awful things happening and awful people doing awful things and more like that as opposed to, I always sort of felt like Star Trek, we're going to piss off a whole bunch of people here, but it's a spotlight show. So we're going to talk about what the hell we feel like. And, it was just too nice. Right. Like, and, Star Wars isn't like better or worse. It's just different. It's very different kind of things. And yeah, so
that's why all the new shows suck, because they're not nice anymore.
Do you know the reason why there's no like HD Babylon 5 release? Why they've never like re-released it in like the quality?
Why?
All the effects shot were in like the effects company that did it. It burned down, and they did not have offsite like backups, and so they've lost all the shots. So to do it like in a higher sample, like higher than like the standard definition, they'd have to redo every effects shot.
Why
instead
not?
Of just
they should do that.
I don't. There's not they won't make enough money to do it.
See,
they
that
did it
sucks,
for the next
because
generation.
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I think Babylon 5 is a good show, and I try to watch it, but the special effects are just so cheesy. I can't get through it.
Because they were using
just
CGI. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 1980 CGI, and they had better stuff back then because it was on the same time as like Star Trek Next Generation and stuff, and that had a lot better stuff.
Because they did practical effects, that's why it was different. Have you seen the Next Generation where they've redone the effects? For the remake or not remake?
For original series, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it looks really good, and that's what I mean. Like they can do it. Other shows have done it.
It's just a market. I don't think that enough people would buy Babylon 5 re-release for it to be worth it.
I'm tempted to contribute, but I'm afraid we're going to end up just diverting things even further. I'm perfectly happy to talk about like Star Wars and Star Trek with you guys. I'm not really sure what our viewers want to hear, but we can. This is one of the subjects that I feel like we could literally like nerd out about for hours. And
there's these like really weird videos on YouTube that like you get if you go down the rabbit hole, and it's like, which would win, the Enterprise or a Star Destroyer? And the guy spends 30 minutes talking about it. Yeah, so we need to like, which would win, an Erebus or the Enterprise, and then have a really, really big argument over over which would be more powerful.
So if we are going to talk about shows, we should at least talk about an Eve show. So if you guys have not seen, Clear Skies 4 was announced. Ian Chisholm, who put together the first 3 Clear Skies, is doing a Clear Skies 4, and he set up a GoFundMe, and I'll find you guys a link here in a minute. So if you want to, he's trying to raise £5,000 to help offset some of the costs, because it was a labor of love, but it cost this guy a ton
about
of
10
money.
goons,
right? Exactly. That's about 10 goons. So I already gave him $250. I think we can probably get him to $5,000. I would like to think by the end of the weekend. He's about almost halfway there. Let me get the link and I'll put that up in there. But if you guys want to see a good Eve storyline like show, Clear Skies is it. And the last one was really, really good. They
Chris,
used
you want
a lot
something
of stuff.
controversial to talk about? I've never watched Clear Skies, and I don't think I ever will.
I've also never watched Clear Skies. I know that puppies make like hot drop a clock jokes and stuff.
They talk so much about it.
Like stuff that's become Eve memes that comes out of Clear Skies.
I put it on for like 1 minute. I'm like, this is really
Yeah, because like that stuff came out like the first ones came out during like the early days of Goonfleet, and that was
right.
This was like 2006 to I don't know. It was in the dawn
2008,
of time.
2009, 2011, I think were the
three. And that was sort of it was at the time more normal Eve culture stuff, and so there was a lot of things that we kind of turned our noses up at. Not that they're necessarily bad, but just at the time when they came out, we were busy trying to murder fuck Band of Brothers, and so that was really the cultural priority. Yeah, no, I'm just, and Marana here in chat is also like never actually watched it. I know that they use the Half-Life 2 models, and somebody goes hot drop a clock and whatever, but
there's some good stuff in there. I mean, there's some stuff that's obviously like very like semi-Eve, or they've taken a lot of licenses with it, but it's still fun. The voice acting's pretty good. The story is pretty good. I like it a lot. It's fun, and I think there are a lot of people in the Eve community that look at that and they're like, all right, this is nostalgia. This is something that got me into the game or kept my interest when the game was still young. And it was way back before the Battle of BTEC-R and the big stuff and all that. It's a good stuff.
All right,
and
I'm going to watch the first episode.
CCP did a live stream of all three of them in a row, and everybody saw that. So.
I'll watch the first episode. I'll give you a report with untainted eyes, like no nostalgia. I'll just, with 20/20 eyes, and I'll tell you if it's any good.
All right.
We could do like an MST3K kind of thing. With, just like shit talking and shit posting our way through.
We would need like 340 people for
cows.
that, though.
Oh yeah, well, we could do it.
Not
looking. Right now, but
we
like,
have to find somebody else.
Do.
We have to get Sadis to do it or something.
We'd have a watch party basically, and get together and just troll the hell out of things. But I don't know. I have literally nothing like with Clear Skies and with the Trek stuff. I've just lost me basically. I hear Deep Space Nine is really good, but
I like it.
Just start watching season 5. Just start watching season 5. Like, don't watch.
Yeah, I tried to watch in season 1 of DS9 because people were like, well, if you like Babylon 5, like DS9 is like the gritty Star Trek, and so I took some fucking like personality test kind of thing that was going around like the celebrity. I mean,
I can't imagine.
Spoiler alert: Asher and I like personality psychology stuff.
Yeah.
And
who was your number one? I remember I was Gandalf. Who was yours?
Let me bring it up. I was actually Robert. I was the 92% on the Westworld guy.
That makes sense.
Let me see if I can.
You need to send me this because I got to take this quiz. I want to see how it is.
I was 84% Gandalf.
If you can give me a moment, I will dig this up because I have it. But I had basically like all of the. But the reason I'm talking about this is that there was some fucking Deep Space Nine character that I was supposed to be very similar to. Okay, and then everybody can see that I'm a fucking maniac. But this is actually a really interesting way of doing this. So for me, unfortunately, it looks like my data has expired. So never mind. But it was. Garak or something was the Deep Space Nine. Garak was something.
Garak,
was the Deep Space
Nine he
character.
he was a spy, so that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
He was totally a spy. He was the best
Garak.
Taylor spy ever.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was mostly the.
Billy, we're talking about Star Trek. That's what we're doing.
What's
right
his
now.
fucking name? God damn it!
Did you ever see that movie
God
Tinker
figure in
Tailor
Westworld.
Soldier Spy? That was a Garrick spinoff.
It was like Robert Ford or something. It was the Anthony Hopkins character in Westworld.
Yes.
That was me, like 92%. But basically, it was all just like mastermind, boss guy, spy dudes for my personality.
That makes sense
testing.
to me.
Coming as a huge surprise is absolutely no one. Why was I talking about that? Star Trek.
Star Trek.
You're talking about the personality test that you took that had all those in there.
Billy is mad that we didn't talk about his cash fight. Like I think my guess is he's been watching this entire episode. We've been watching this entire episode, waiting for us to talk about this big fight, and then
is it actually Billy or is it somebody playing like Billy? Because doesn't he normally post on a different account?
That's Billy.
Okay.
We spent 3 minutes talking about it.
We do have
mentioned the fight. I mean, the problem is that none of us were there, and we haven't gotten a really good idea of what exactly.
We were planning on talking about it next week. Yeah, like we actually wanted to have like a nullsec power hour, but like the only news this week, really, in terms of like big spaceships, was this slap fight in cache that we don't really know or understand. And if it's part of like a broader context, like there's like a campaign or something, we talk about it. But I thought it was such a weird outline kind of thing that I'm like, well, if we try to talk about this on the meta show, it might seem like we're trying to like make something out of nothing. Because who the fuck knows what's going on? So Billy, please tell us what happened, and we'll talk about it next week.
I mean, if this is the start of like a Legacy versus PanFam war, that's great. I'd love to talk about that. But if it's just a fight over a fort, welcome to Eve. It's a day ending.
It would be awesome. Like if we could get because I feel like Legacy and PanFam are
Jay
pretty
found
well
my
matched up.
personality answers. This is.
Nice.
I'm mostly Robert Ford and Olena Tyrell and Elam Garak and.
Garrick, okay. I can totally see you as Olena Tyrell.
And apparently the big bad guy in the Hunger Games or something.
He's very catty, especially behind closed doors. Min's very catty, so Olena makes sense.
That is totally true.
I'm gonna start calling you the Queen of Thorns. Actually, that's
I am perfectly comfortable with it. Like when I
you.
saw Alina Tyrell, my reaction was not because I don't know the Harry Potter references. I didn't watch the Hunger Games or anything like that. I did not like watch Deep Space Nine or anything like that. But when I was like Robert Ford and Alina Tyrell, like yeah, that was a fucking badass character. I'm perfectly comfortable with that. So
Anyway, I am looking forward to good matched up conflicts. Like I said, Legacy and PanFam, that's a good match, I think, right? And then Goons versus Conifers. Oh, I love these even fights. That's the most important thing for me.
versus Conference. Oh man, yeah. Yeah, the test, there is the... So I thought this was really interesting because this is like a different kind of personality test because you use sliders to basically... It's a self-assessment, and instead of like yes or no questions, you drag a bar as a slider, and then it compares you to everybody else's slider, bar, drag, whatever, views of a whole bunch of different fictional characters. So it's like not quite like answering Myers-Briggs questions, and of course it's only answering what you perceive yourself as. So like I might think of myself as a spy mastermind type, but the questions aren't asking that. It's just like on a slide of how arrogant you are versus how humble you are. Is it on a 1 through 100 thing? Anyway, whatever. I could talk about this crap all day and probably annoy the hell out of everyone.
I have an idea, Mittens. I think it'd be interesting if we just recorded like a meeting, like a goon meeting, and then let it sit for like 6 months until everything discussed was no longer relevant, right? And then you can release that. I've always thought that like command comms and FC fleets would be interesting for people to hear, especially the more involved ones. But you can't like stream that ever. But like it'd be good to record it, and then once everything is beyond useful, then you could release that information. I think people would be interested in hearing that. Do you think that would be something a lot of people listen to, or that'd be a really niche thing?
We declassify things sometimes, and it is really interesting when there is like a partial hangout, as it were, where when we released all of the diplomatic archives after CO2 betrayed us, and we're like, okay, well, they went fuck goons, so here is literally the entire diplomatic history of all the logs and records of every conversation between Goon Swarm and CO2. Go nuts. And some people did in fact dive into that. I think that it is always fascinating when we go to these big events where people get to see the actual Goon Swarm directors like running around together and being ourselves versus whatever weird perception that they have, particularly from outside of Goon Swarm. Like people who are goons deal with us all day, every day on Jabber and like talk mad shit, and we're sort of all whatever. But it is always fascinating to run into the pubby ideas of who we are and how we roll and like what we do. And so that's always funny. I don't know if people would actually want a recording of it or not, but I think it's something we could do. Like when we declassified Digi's home defense thread, that was a classic.
I think I would love to hear Marana tell you guys to shut up and get back on topic 1,000 times in a meeting. I think that
our meetings are really fucking boring, though. I mean, they're not like, oh my god, end of the world boring, but it's like, congratulations, you're running an international mega corporation, and you have all these people who have portfolios and things.
It's a lot of HR.
It is. I mean, you're conquering the galaxy ain't easy. So, but some of the other shit that we could do recordings of. I don't know. It would be something to be interested in. I don't know if people would buy it or not.
All right, gentlemen. Well, we managed to go an hour and not really talk about anything of substance.
I'm happy to keep talking about nothing in particular.
I'm fine.
Like, if you guys want to rush off or something, we can do it, or we can go on. I don't know, dudes in chat, if you would like to see us talk about something or other, because we're happy to talk about anything. Again, it's a whole bunch of weirdos. Just why isn't Satan wearing his red? Because this is family friendly mittens. I've got a red tie on. Yeah, it's sort of a burgundy, but. I kind of experimenting with the outfits now, and so like when I want to take the gloves off, I think I'll have on shows red and black, and
Could
so people
someone
have an
explain
expectation.
Dunk Dinkle salvage drones? Like, I know this is his meme, but like, what is the meme? Why is that a meme? I don't get it.
He just wants salvage drones that don't fail as often, so it's quicker to salvage stuff. That's all.
He wants better salvage drones.
Correct.
I mean, look, we want to talk about drone minutia. The E-War drones really need an overview. When they released them, I think they didn't want to release them in an overpowered state, and they just released them and never iterated. And they're slow. They have like a quarter of the HP of all the other combat drones. They really could be useful if they weren't so garbage. So there's an actual Eve topic. So when they're reviewing the E-War drones, I want those Tech 2 salvage drones for Dunk, and we've really improved Eve just by that one suggestion.
You completely lost me, but there, and that's fine. But one of the comments in chat about like people not understanding things in our meetings, there was actually kind of a funny story about this. So when I think that the culture of the Imperium has become like the culture of the line members and the things that we do is not really all that different than the culture of general EVE organizations. Like we're Goonie, we have allies that are not Goonie. We've got our shibboleths and our perks and stuff like that. But organizationally speaking, we have become like a completely alien presence. And I didn't really realize this because I thought what we were doing was normal. But after we lost the first phase of the casino war, before we ran around and sort of, slitting throats of our enemies over the next couple of years, we introduced all these really wide-ranging reforms. And when Dead Coalition kind of imploded or decided to break up or whatever, we had several entities reaching out to us in order to see what it would be like to join the Imperium. And we're like, cool, okay, well, here is the Imperial Charter, where we literally have like a code of laws to just avoid disputes, and like it's written down, and once you sign on the line in blood, you're in the Imperium, and then these rules are considered to be applying to you. And like, here's how we structure this, and here's how we structure that. And I won't to go into too many details, but it was basically like, even the things that in the Imperium we take for granted, like, for example, number one, maybe you shouldn't let any random person have a keep star such that they can then hand it over to your enemies and stage their Titan fleets in the middle of your space. Like, we do not allow people to just have keep stars randomly because it is a huge security threat from an espionage perspective. And we know this because we are famous for stealing people's keep stars. We do this to other people. So naturally within the Imperium, we're not going to let any random Tom, Dick, and Harry have a fucking keep star. And we see this as just like perfectly normal and reasonable because, again, war. And these guys coming to us, I was just like, why are they surprised by this? Like, wait, doesn't everybody do this? And it was really like one of these weird like wake up moments to realize that our organizational culture and our policies and the way that we have set up this empire is now completely alien to the way that the other space empires are run anymore. They're in like a pre-casino war sort of reality, because I guess they won the first phase of the casino war, so they didn't have to adapt and change. So yeah, whatever. I got nothing.
The one thing I wanted to ask Asher about was one of the things that I saw in the minutes that I thought was kind of cool was the idea of potentially doing bubbles on Hictors and Dictors that do stuff other than warp disruption, like webs, like a webbing bubble or a nuding bubble.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be cool, or do you think that would be too overpowered?
Yeah, the problem is like, so I don't know how you balance it. So it's either going to be one or the other. It can't be sort of middle ground, like fairly balanced. It's going to be really strong or really weak, and it'd probably default to really weak. So I just don't think it's worth the development time that it would probably take. I've thought about it too. The one bubble I'd like to see maybe is a bubble that adds mass, and it can only be used on Hictors. That would make insta-warp
like
interceptors
slow everything down, like not like a web, but it would still slow stuff down, like make it
exactly. It would slow your alarm times down on a gate. There'd be other nifty things you could do with it, but it could make, if you have a Hictor on a gate, you could catch insta-warp interceptors if you had that plus an insta-locker. So that's the one thing I'd like to see, which I don't think would be game breaking, but would be really cool. Some guy in chat asked us to talk about addle-addles, which I actually know about.
Like the spears, addle-addles?
Well, yeah, they're spear throwers. They're used by Native Americans. Yeah. They increase your leverage and let you throw a spear further. So I'm happy.
Aerodynamically sound so that you can, have a limp-wristed throwing style and still win.
Well, what it is, like they're a bar, sort of like a stick that you have
a little notch in.
Yeah, the notch in the end, and
It makes your arm longer. It just gives you better leverage. You could throw a spear really hard or an arrow with them, So we're going to the Addle Museum tomorrow. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Asher, and in terms of important things that goons do together, have you guys watched sumo anytime recently?
Well, so
is there any really going on now?
So there was a sumo basho earlier this month. Every other month, and there was no crowd there. It was really weird. Obviously, this is happening with a lot of sports, but there was no crowd, and you heard a lot of slapping noises that you didn't really hear when there's a background noise going on. It was, listen, I enjoyed it. What can I say? I found out something new about myself that day. But other people, I don't think they appreciated it as much as I did.
One of those things about sumo is I've learned so much about boxing just by knowing Asher, right? Like just as a quirk of this, boxing analogies and things. I've never really
Yeah.
been into boxing and things like that. And from your perspective, as somebody who like understands boxing, is sumo kind of like that? Is there any carryover, or is it sumo is just more like wrestling, and it's not really at all?
It's closer to wrestling. It's super interesting. I mean, I actually didn't. I mean, I'm really glad we got into it. Do you know the story of how it happened?
No, go ahead.
It's a really weird story. So, this guy sent me a message. He pinged me a message asking me to promote his stream. It was some goon, like maybe a Dutch or German one, and he sent me a message saying, "Can you ping out my stream?" And we don't ping out people's streams, like. And so I replied, I'm like, "Oh, do you have a PayPal or Patreon you'd like me to include as well?" And he didn't get the sarcasm. Yeah.
He totally thought you were serious.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me get it for you. Hold on.
Yeah. So, so I just found this tool. It was like for Twitch, and it was like it showed you Twitch channels that had no viewers. So I just went to find a funny Twitch channel and replace his stream link with that Twitch channel. And there was one, it was like these high quality shots of crabs underwater, like professionally done photos of crabs. I'm like, this is perfect for goods. They love crabbing. It's ideal. And so I put it in there. I replaced his stream link, but I pasted everything else and I replaced the link with that stream. Okay, good joke. And then I gave a PAP link to people in the chat, in the Twitch chat. I just said, if you are in the Twitch chat, I said, join my fleet for a PAP link. So and that was the end of it. Well, little did I know that stream was a sumo stream, and some goons who had put it on like 8 hours before kept it up. And 8 hours later, it started playing the first day of a sumo tournament. And so someone messaged me and they're like, this crab stream is now playing sumo. And
why were they showing crabs before? Is that like the puppy bowl or something?
No,
but with crabs?
That was probably just their here, watch some crabs while we get your fat guys ready for you.
Yeah, exactly. It was just like they're just running stock footage basically while they waited.
Okay.
Costa Check's holding up 7 fingers. So I have told this story before.
Did you guys
7 times.
Did you see the video that was going around on Twitter yesterday and the day before of a baggage claim bag cracked open, and somebody, I don't know where it was, somewhere in the United States, there were literally just a bag full of crabs, live crabs. And so on the baggage claim carousel, there's just a sea of crabs running around, and people are. It was amazing.
It reminds me of my ex.
Okay.
I love it.
Yeah. No, I think we should probably actually call things, because otherwise I will literally sit here and just shoot the shit with these guys for the next hour, and I am cool with doing that. But I've also found that wearing all this crap and getting excited and talking about anything and everything that I feel like is really hot. Like I'm starting to feel a little.
Just go casual, Let's lose that coat jacket. Let's get.
Take the ascots off and.
I need to step up my game and get like an ascot or something.
This may surprise you, Briss, but I have already taken my ascot off.
I'm glad you have, because I don't want you to feel too overly dressed today.
Wow. A meta show after party. All right, guys. Well, let's call it. I mean, this has been fun, and we're going to do these spotlight shows more often. Again, when we started out the rebooted meta show, when we didn't have news to really dive into, we would just cancel the show. And now we've started doing like fireside things, spotlight shows, and Jerry Springer make fun of Olmeca Gold shows. So, we try to mix it up. But next week, we do expect to have space news. Villy hopefully will tell us what he would like us to discuss about whatever the hell happened in Cache. And Villy, if you're still watching and you want to come on the show next week, you are more than welcome. We can do a Nullsec Power Hour. I would like to do a Nullsec Power Hour because I would love to have news to talk about in Nullsec besides talking about supercarrier ratting or whatever the fuck. So it's too late. The moment is gone now, alas.
Hey, shout out to CCP for naming a region Cache and then another catch, just to make it super.
So that nobody can understand what the hell you're talking about.
Also, another good one is near Brave's home system, V3, VTAC3, and BTAC3 together.
Right.
Like, it is so easy. Yeah, next to each other. That is the most easy to confuse. You have to say Bravo or Victor.
There's 2 FTAC ends, so I always say one's fake FTAC end and one is real FTAC end.
Oh yeah,
The one's in Aquarius and the other's somewhere else. I can't remember where it is. I think Syndicate. So yeah.
All right, boys and girls, that's it. I'm calling it. I'm doing it.
All right,
Chris, play
gentlemen,
us
thank
off.
you so much. Asher, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate having you on the
Good to be here.
Spotlight
Thanks for having
Show.
me.
As always, pine cones, Delenda Est, and you stay classy, New Eden.
Thanks, guys.